Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Midnight Love Song by Anabelle Bryant. Narrated by Victoria Aston. Prologue. Dante closed his eyes and inhaled the familiar scent of burning sage and fresh rosemary. For as long as he could remember, the best way for him to see things clearly was to drench himself in darkness. It was well past midnight, and everyone had already left this section of Vauxhall Gardens, anxious to congregate near the live music and supper boxes before the entertainment grounds closed and the gates were locked for the evening. As if to prove his assumption, he looked toward the entrance of the tent where the world outside was quiet. Still, he waited unhurried as he touched one candle to the next and brought each wick to flame. He knew with certainty, by the innate sense and inexplicable skill he possessed, that someone would arrive, an important someone who desperately needed him to foretell their fate beyond the casual reassurances offered from a friend, someone who needed the lifeline Dante was prepared to supply. It was unusual to see a customer after hours. However, the day had been filled with a steady stream of visitors, a high-born lady who wanted confirmation of her suitor's devotion, an older gentleman who questioned the years he had left and the sincerity of his heir, two buffoonish young bucks who sought an undetectable way to cheat at the gaming tables. Each customer left the tent satisfied, even though they'd departed with a discordant understanding of what had happened after they'd entered and experienced Dante's intuitive ability to sense their hidden emotions. Because of their shocked reactions, Dante always shared the images he saw within his mind's eye in a straightforward, tactful manner. Nevertheless, it was no simple task to prepare someone for death, to tell a woman she would never carry a child, to warn a young debutante her intended was more interested in her dowry than her affection. No one lived a charmed life, and he strove for honesty and eloquence regardless of a person's station, because not all his customers were knobs. Most were ordinary people enjoying an outing at Vauxhall, some curious, others seeking novel entertainment, all of them mysteriously changed by the experience. Now he returned his gaze to the opening between the tent flaps, where a narrow triangle allowed him a glimpse of the night sky. The lighted moon was nearly full, bloated with roundness, as if it too waited for a sign. Scientists called it a gibbous moon, but anyone familiar with fortune-telling and second sight knew that particular phase represented the womb of potential, a time in the celestial cycle when vital transformation and unexpected activity occurred, when true change was possible. He was still considering this phenomenon when a haloed silhouette interrupted his sightline. "Excuse me." Dante nodded in greeting, and the stranger entered, pulled forward by the allure of invisible promises and the temptation of grasping control of an impossible situation. "I don't have an appointment." A note of uncertainty accompanied the statement. "I expected you," he said, and indicated the chair on the other side of the wooden table with a subtle gesture. Dante claimed the opposite seat and waited. So much of divinity was contingent upon patience and acceptance. "I don't know what I'm doing here, or if you can help me, but—" The words faded away, disappearing like the wisps of smoke that danced above the wax candles. "You would like a reading?" Dante extended his bare hand, palm side exposed, his own map of identity displayed in patterned lines and whirling prints. Would his invitation be accepted? The stranger stared at Dante's palm, with eyes widened and the slightest crease in an otherwise smooth brow. Dante had anticipated this hesitation, and yet, if he could connect, hand in hand, skin to skin, His ability to discover truth and foretell the future would become more reliable. How disappointing the courage needed to join their fingers wasn't present. After another breath, Dante withdrew his hand. To the cards, then. He picked up his deck of tarot cards and waited for some acknowledgement to proceed, which came in an almost imperceivable nod. He sensed nervousness, uncertainty, and the subtle presence of unfulfilled longing in that hesitation. "I cannot solve your problems," he stated, his voice matter-of-fact, "nor can I tell you what course of action to take." He always began with a clarification of the information that would be shared. Most people weren't familiar with tarot card reading, palmistry, or other divination arts. "It is my hope you'll leave with clarity concerning the reason that prompted you to visit me. And you will predict my future." "No," Dante replied succinctly. "The future is fluid. No one can foretell what will happen with any amount of surety. You have the ability to change your mind, cause events to happen, or prevent them, which would thereby shift the result. But the cards will offer possible outcomes. They will identify influences, and that information is helpful." "I understand." Dante shuffled the deck and placed it at the center of the table. He drew the top 3 cards and arranged them in a horizontal line. "We will begin with the 3 fates. These cards represent your past, present, and future." "Go ahead." The words were little more than a whisper. A sense of foreboding crowded in among the other emotions in the room, and as Dante reached toward the first card, he wondered what this late-night visitor feared so fervently that not even an exhale escaped. The Magician. The first card lay revealed, the ink drawing clearly exposed in the flickering candlelight. The Magician is a symbol of resourcefulness and determination. It represents willpower and endurance. This card suggests you've met the difficult challenges of your past with unfaltering strength. "It hasn't been easy." A soft huff chased these words. "This card also represents disparate intangible feelings and unsettled issues," Dante explained. "Since it offers a glimpse into the past, it reminds that no satisfaction can be found if disharmony is left unresolved." "It's impossible to change the past." The customer's words had a bitter edge. "That is true, but only a fool would ignore its lessons," Dante replied. "Shall I proceed?" Again there was the slightest nod. He turned the second card with a precise flick of his fingers. The picture showed a black and white drawing of the full moon with a field of stars behind it. A fanciful border of swirling leaves and gusty wind created a frame along the card's edges. "That's quite beautiful, and yet dangerous," Dante said evenly. "The moon represents the subconscious and an individual's shadow side. It can signify something you've hidden or a concealed truth you've kept from yourself and others. It suggests betrayal and the existence of a veil of deception." Several beats of silence followed, and Dante waited. He noticed the nervous tap of a boot heel beneath the table. Then, unexpectedly, the stranger stood. "I've changed my mind." A coin-filled purse dropped down atop the last card, keeping its face hidden. "I have to go." "Are you certain you wouldn't like me to continue? The last card depicts your future fate, and it will offer you valuable insight." "No, I've heard enough. Thank you for your time." "I can read your palm or brew tea and consult the leaves." But Dante's words went unheard as the tent flap fell back into place. Left alone inside the tent, he drew a deep breath and revealed the final card. The Hanged Man stared back at him. "It is better you didn't stay," Dante said to no one. "Soon, something will turn your world upside down. I hope you are prepared." 1. The stars have aligned in your favour. Aha! Graham Milford entered his father's study, a laugh chasing his exuberant exclamation. "I knew you'd be in here stargazing and otherwise avoiding the gathering in the ballroom." Are you suggesting I'm that predictable? Evelyn Osbourne didn't turn from the window. She'd expected Graham to find her sooner, not later. "It's more that I know you implicitly, dear cousin," Graham replied as he strode farther into the room. "Or so you believe. Dare you think differently? By personality, you are my twin," he said with confidence. "However, that's not why I was certain you'd be in here. I suppose it's that we grew up in each other's pocket, thicker than thieves, and thereby became incredibly like-minded, so you're here, like me, seeking an escape." Still facing the window, Evelyn smiled, idly wondering if, from where Graham stood, he could see her reflection in the glass. "Nevertheless, that isn't to say you know everything about me. Our youth is long past." "Birdie," he objected, using the nickname he'd given her during their shared childhood, a remembrance of when they'd spent summer days running about the countryside chasing butterflies, the breeze in her hair, a song on her lips. "You make 27 years sound like a death sentence. 1 foot in the grave and all that." He dropped onto the overstuffed sofa beside the hearth. "That's not true. Proof that your suggestion is absurd exists only a few rooms down the hall, where, at the ripe age of 34, your brother is bravely embracing a new beginning among a roomful of convivial guests." She turned and offered him a smirk of satisfaction. "But you're not enjoying the party. You disappeared as soon as the first toast was completed. You know I can't abide romantic foolishness," she sighed, quick to amend her comment for fear it had sounded insulting. "In spite of that, I am pleased for your brother and wish him the very best in his marriage." She gestured in the air, her fingers fluttering in a circular motion, assured Graham would understand everything she hadn't said, because, in truth, her bond with her cousin was the closest thing she had to a sibling and best friend. She treasured their banter and inane conversations, their loyal and steadfast companionship through a history of assorted situations, both joyful and unfortunate. The mood in the room shifted, and when she met Graham's eyes, she knew he was going to say something more serious. "You shouldn't allow your father's philandering to ruin your perception of personal relationships. That's easier said than done," she huffed dismissively. "Your parents have been happily wed for decades, and you're surrounded by family members who've maintained respectful, loving marriages. By contrast, my only relative, my father, broke his vows repeatedly and deceived my mother up until her death. He actually visited one of his mistresses the same afternoon as my mother's funeral. I doubt he sought spiritual consolation." "I'm sure that couldn't have been easy," Graham agreed with candour. She had no doubt Graham was knowledgeable of his uncle's disgraceful behaviour and the painful humiliation it caused her. Months before, Graham was the person who told her how a gentleman's indiscretion was referred to as an Osbourne in a running joke at the club. He protected her that way, preparing her for the newest gossip in hopes of sparing her further embarrassment. "Forgive me if my enthusiasm for devoted affection seems deficient," she said blithely, "but you weren't forced to silently tolerate the backward glances and poorly concealed whispers year after year." "No," his empathy was sincere. "Considering all that, I'm amazed you've salvaged any sense of romance." "I'm not sure I have, and that's rather sad, isn't it? Good thing I'm always poised to provide an amusing distraction." She settled next to him on the sofa and bumped her shoulder into his in a familiar gesture that expressed understanding and affection. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll never have to find out," he replied automatically. They sat in silence, the distant strains of orchestra music and lively conversational reverie pleasant to hear in the background. "Although," she began after a time, "it is a case of the pot calling the kettle black for you to question my disinterest in romantic entanglements." "Entanglements," Graham repeated, drawing out the syllables with mischief in his tone. "An interesting word choice, one that conjures images of arms and legs and silken bedsheets. You're hopeless." "Maybe," he conceded. Probably. The unspoken truth in her cousin's offhanded comment cut too close to the bone. She wouldn't object to being loved by a handsome beau. When she allowed herself to consider it, she knew she'd welcome the adoring attention of a suitor, but the necessary process to advance to that point made her feel queasy, panicked, hopeless in a different manner altogether. Because what honourable gentleman from a respected heritage would ever seek a familial connection with her father? The overflow stained one's character by association. To spare herself the inevitable pain over the years, she'd built strong walls around her heart, impenetrable walls. Only a fool would put all that hard work to waste, and Evelyn was anything but a fool. "We can be alone together," Graham teased, unaware of her inner turmoil. "That's hypocritical for you to suggest," she replied quickly. "With or without me, you're never alone." "What does that mean?" "Only that you've kept your special someone a secret, and I'd very much like to meet Avery and get to know her, but you refuse to allow it." Evelyn didn't mention how much it hurt that Graham excluded her from such a significant part of his life. She believed they told each other everything, whether important or frivolous. From an early age, their unadulterated honesty and shared trust was so much a part of their friendship, she wouldn't dare conceal relevant ideas or difficult decisions. To that end, Graham didn't ordinarily behave in a secretive manner, but when it came to matters of the heart, he kept his affairs completely private. Regardless of this choice, Evelyn was there to help him through the emotional distress when one of his relationships ended. Although she felt like an afterthought, available to pick up the pieces of his broken heart but not enjoy the happier moments beforehand, it was one of the few riddles that existed between them, and another reason she avoided love at all costs. Romance often ended in heartache. "It's better that way," Graham mused, "that I don't involve you in my fickle affairs." "Better for you," she replied, "but not me. How will I ever be able to torture you with embarrassing stories from the past if you don't allow me to spend time with Avery?" When Graham didn't reply, she changed the subject, unwilling to press when he clearly didn't want to discuss it. "Do you ever wish you could be someone else?" "At least once a day," he replied, his smile sliding back into place. "No, I'm serious," she said, even though her own smile escaped. "Is that what you were doing, over there, near the windows? Making wishes?" "No, not exactly." She shook her head, the sway of her long dark ringlets echoing the gesture. "I was searching for Cassiopeia. I thought it fitting for this evening. Given Cassiopeia and her king are the only husband and wife couple depicted in the night sky, if I located the constellation I intended to make a wish for your brother's future happiness. But then you interrupted me." "Poor timing on my part." "Poor timing, yet no harm was done. Without your father's telescope, there was little chance I'd locate the correct stars," she admitted, enjoying their light-hearted banter more than their earlier conversation. "If the skies are clear tomorrow evening, perhaps I'll return and shut myself up in Uncle's conservatory for a few hours." "Graham? Evelyn?" Her cousin Kate entered, striding purposefully toward where they relaxed on the sofa, an expression of dubious relief etched across her face. "I should have known if I found one of you I'd find the other." "Am I in trouble, or are you simply in a state because you're missing me, dear sister?" Graham asked. "Neither." A wide grin bloomed across Kate's face. "I wish to speak to Evelyn, but in case you both need a reminder, tonight's party is being held in the ballroom." "That's why we're in here," Graham murmured. "I hope you haven't spent too long looking for me," Evelyn said. "You're a right troublemaker, Evelyn. Everyone knows that," Graham added. She swatted his shoulder in response to the remark. Graham was the daredevil, rabble-rouser and jester of the family, always at the ready to stir up chaos with his antics. How like him to mislabel her as an instigator. With that she stood up, smoothed her gown, and readied herself to return to the party. "An acquaintance of the groom-to-be has asked for an introduction," Kate explained. "He wants to meet me." "Interesting." Graham stood and tugged at his waistcoat in an effort to straighten his attire. He heard you sing at church during Mass 3 weeks ago when the banns were announced for Thomas's wedding, and he's here this evening for the engagement celebration." "And he remembered my singing?" Evelyn couldn't keep the bewilderment from her voice. She'd only sung one hymn at the request of her aunt and uncle. "Oh, yes," Kate nodded. "He inquired whether you'd be here as soon as he arrived." "The plot thickens," Graham quipped, his thick brows arched high. "Although I'm not surprised someone was taken by your lovely singing, Evelyn. You have the voice of an angel and the face of a goddess. Now, who is this mystery man?" "I don't know very much," Kate answered. "His name is Mr. Barrett, and he and his wife met Thomas through a mutual friend at the theatre. Perhaps they run in the same set." "So he isn't a bachelor?" Graham asked, sounding deflated. "Stop that!" Evelyn glared at him, and then, reclaiming her smile, shifted her attention to Kate. "Lead the way. I'd very much like to meet Mr. Barrett, if he's gone through the trouble of seeking me out." Evelyn followed Kate, hoping Graham's teasing was at an end for the evening. As they entered the ballroom, it appeared at least the toast and poetic tributes had finished. The orchestra played a lively tune, while pockets of guests drank champagne and leaned close to be heard over the music. Evelyn kept a watchful eye for her father, wanting to avoid him if possible. Luckily, he was nowhere to be seen. Having delivered Evelyn and Graham to the Barretts, Kate stepped away and vanished into the crowd before Evelyn could thank her. The elegant couple appeared rather innocuous and was composed of a tall, trim man with a bright-eyed woman at his elbow. Introductions were made swiftly, and curious to the reason Mr. Barrett wished to speak to her, Evelyn inquired immediately, "It was mentioned that you'd asked about my singing. Is that correct?" She sincerely hoped Mr. Barrett didn't request she perform at his upcoming family function or dinner party. While she was aware she possessed some talent and had trained for years with various vocal instructors, singing was something that brought her personal joy. She had no desire to stand before an audience, subject to speculation, a vulnerable target at centre stage. Mr. Barrett cleared his throat. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Lady Osbourne. Once I listened to you sing at the Mass for your cousin, I knew I needed to speak to you." Evelyn waited, unsure what Mr. Barrett implied. "If you're not aware," he continued, "I'm the owner of Vauxhall Gardens, the entertainment property on the south bank of the Thames. Currently I'm reorganising the attractions." "Wasn't there a horrible fire there recently?" Graham asked. "Yes, and thankfully no one perished, but it was a devastating loss all the same," Mrs. Barrett chimed in. "My parents owned the property then, and they've since retired. My husband is the proprietor now." "The resulting damage left by the fire has instigated a grand restoration of the grounds, and after weeks of tireless planning and hard work, everything is in place for future success," Mr. Barrett explained. "That's wonderful," Evelyn replied, still unsure of the man's intentions. "Well, almost everything," Mrs. Barrett amended with a slight smile. "Originally I had hired the acclaimed Italian opera singer Signora Modalla for a premiere engagement, but the commitment did not come to fruition. A month ago she eloped with her piano player, and the two haven't been seen since." Graham laughed, disguising his chuckle as a cough as soon as he realised the Barretts found no humour in the situation. "And what does all of this have to do with me?" Evelyn asked, a sense of trepidation creeping up her throat. "Once I heard you sing, I realised I'd experienced no loss by the Signora's absence. Your voice moved me to tears. Every note stirred a new emotion. Visitors will flock to Vauxhall for such a memorable experience," Mr. Barrett replied passionately. Evelyn shook her head to discourage the suggestion. "I'm so sorry, but I don't perform. Not on a stage, at least." "We can have any type of platform built for you," Mrs. Barrett added quickly. "I don't sing in public." "Not really," Evelyn tried to correct the misconception. "We're sorry to hear that," Mr. Barrett frowned. "We thought with certainty you were a professional singer." A breath of relief swept through Evelyn at hearing Mr. Barrett's remarks. hoping the matter would now be put to rest. "Are you classically trained?" Mrs. Barrett asked next. "I've had a few lessons through my—" "Evelyn has studied with the finest voice tutors in England," Graham boasted. "She even sang for King George." Mrs. Barrett gasped. "An honour like that would look wonderful on an advertisement." "I was 10 years old, Graham," Evelyn gritted out through clenched teeth, "and part of England's Royal Children's Choir." "Seems like only yesterday," Graham commented beside her. "Of course, with such a gift, your hesitant consideration is understandable," Mr. Barrett said, a bright twinkle alive in his eyes. "You'd be compensated generously and able to dictate how many shows per evening you'd like to perform. We're just happy to have you grace our stage." "I would think only 2 shows a week," Graham interjected. "The best way to keep people coming back to Vauxhall is to have them hungry for a performance. You need to create demand. If visitors miss the show, they'll want to return, and if they hear Evelyn sing, they'll still want to return. It's a winning proposition for everyone." "Wait, what?" Evelyn spun to face Graham, with her eyes flared wide. "It's a sensible suggestion." He held up both palms, as if innocent of any wrongdoing. Drawing a deep breath, Evelyn returned her attention to the Barretts. "I'm sorry, but I think we have a misunderstanding. In fact, I know we do," she explained as a spiral of ill-ease weaved through her ribs. "Allow me a moment." Graham clasped Evelyn's arms and tugged her aside. Wriggling in an attempt to free herself, she nearly collided with a footman who moved by with a tray of champagne. She made a grab for a glass and missed. "What do you think you're doing?" "Won't it be fun?" Graham asked, waggling his brows. "I can be your helper, reassuring and supporting you, but kept in the background, something like a manager. I'm not going to hie off to Vauxhall and sing on stage. The last thing I want is to draw attention to myself. Think of the gossip it would stir up." "Think of the experience," Graham countered, more gravity in his voice now. "I have a good feeling about this." "Well, I don't." "But you will," he insisted. "I doubt it." She wrapped her arm around her middle and drew a deep breath. "Consider all the new people you'll meet. I have plenty of friends. Besides, how would I meet new people if I'm on a stage by myself?" She narrowed her eyes at him to emphasize her point. "Details," he waved his hand. "These are just minor details. For years I've avoided calling attention to myself because the name Osbourne automatically conjures my father's sullied reputation and his blatant disregard for etiquette and decorum." She shook her head, looking back over her shoulder to where the Barretts waited patiently. "I'm trying desperately to keep my reputation intact. Why would I ever give the tongue-wag something scandalous to talk about? Because instead of associating the name Osbourne with clandestine indiscretions, bawdy ladybirds and drunken foolishness, you'll be able to show the world you're more than your father's daughter, that you're a unique person, talented and beautiful, someone beyond reproach. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" "Yes," she exhaled slowly, struggling with the mix of emotions whirling inside her. "But Graham, this is your chance to prove everyone wrong," he persisted, his words resolute. "All you need to do is trust yourself." 2. Fate is often decided by circumstance. Malcolm Walker tied off his boat and secured the rope before he checked to see if any of the other watermen needed a hand. The Thames was choppy this morning, and rowing practice hadn't gone well. If he wasn't such a seasoned oarsman, he might have fallen overboard, just like Kincaid, who was currently wringing out his soggy shirt amid jeers from the 10 men standing on the riverbank. As a group of 12, Malcolm and the other rowers practiced nearly every morning before they continued on with their individual pursuits. One of the new attractions at Vauxhall Gardens included an exhibition of boat races, with a rowing competition for watermen and sailing match for more dignified gentlemen. Malcolm knew to which group he belonged, and between the prize money and the wagering promised to take place, he intended to put his brawn to good use and walk away with a pocketful of winnings each week. If he saved most of the money, it would be enough for him to move on to his next destination, wherever that might be.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?